Imagine a family so powerful they could control an entire continent. Now, what if I told you that continent was Antarctica? Today, we're counting up the top 10 most influential families in the world, leading to the one that supposedly runs the frozen south. They ain't just rich, they're on another level. We're talking about dynasties that have been pulling strings for centuries. Some of them have more money than entire countries. Others have connections that reach all the way to the top of governments. The Rothschild Family. These guys started from the bottom, like literally in the ghetto of Frankfurt, but they didn't stay there long. The Rothschild family's rise to power is like something out of a movie. It all began with Meyer Amschel Rild. This guy was just a coin dealer, nothing fancy, but he had big dreams and even bigger skills. He turned that small-time coin business into a financial empire that would change the world. But here's where it gets crazy. Meyer had 5 sons, and these brothers took their dad's success and multiplied it by like 1,000,000. They spread out across Europe, each setting up their own bank. Nathan went to London, Jacob to Paris, Salomon to Vienna, and Kalman to Naples. Together, they built a network of banks that was like nothing the world had ever seen. These Rothschild brothers weren't just rich, they were powerful. They had connections to kings, queens, and political leaders all over Europe. And get this, they even financed wars. Yeah, you heard that right. During the Napoleonic Wars, Nathan Rothschild was the guy supplying the British Army with gold. That's some serious influence right there. But it wasn't just about war. The Rothschilds dominated the international bond market. When governments needed money, guess who they turned to? Yep, the Rothschild family. They were like the ultimate lenders, bailing out entire countries when they were in trouble. Now, you might be wondering how they kept all this wealth and power in the family. Well, they were smart about it. They arranged marriages strategically and kept the business within the family. It was all about keeping that Rothschild dynasty going strong. And boy, did it work. The Rothschild family's influence is still felt today. They've got financial institutions all over the world that trace their roots back to those 5 brothers. We're talking about a legacy that's lasted for generations. But here's the thing that really sets the Rothschilds apart. They weren't just good at making money, they were masters at using information. They had this huge network that let them know what was going on before anyone else. It's like they could see the future of the financial markets. And you know how some families have a few skeletons in their closet? Well, the Rothschilds have whole conspiracy theories. People have been speculating about their influence in global politics for centuries. Some of the stories are pretty wild, but that's what happens when you're this rich and this secretive. The Agnelli family. Starting up with their claim to fame, Fiat, yeah, that car company your cousin probably drives. But for the Agnellis, it's way more than just a car brand. It's the cornerstone of an empire that's been shaping Italy's economy for over a century. Giovanni Agnelli founded Fiat back in 1899, and since then, the family's been in the driver's seat of Italy's auto industry. We're talking about a company that at one point was making 95% of Italy's car market. That's not just success, that's domination. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Agnellis didn't stop at cars. They looked at the auto industry and thought, nah, that's not enough. So they started spreading their influence like butter on hot toast. They got their hands on Ferrari, yeah, those sleek red speed machines, Agnelli territory. But that's just the start. They also nabbed Maserati, Alfa Romeo, and even Chrysler. It's like they were playing Monopoly with the car industry, and they were winning big time. But cars were just the beginning for these guys. The Agnellis had their eyes on bigger prizes. They started buying up media companies like they were going out of style. Newspapers, publishing houses, you name it. They even got a piece of The Economist. So, not only were they making the cars, they were also controlling what people were reading while stuck in traffic. And let's not forget about sports. The Agnellis own Juventus, one of the biggest soccer clubs in the world. So, they're not just influencing what people drive and read, but also what team they cheer for on weekends. Now you might be thinking, okay, they're rich and own a bunch of stuff. So what? Well, here's where it gets really wild. The Agnellis aren't just business tycoons. They're major players in Italian politics too. Gianni Agnelli, who ran the show for most of the 20th century, was known as the King of Italy. And we're not talking about some nickname his mom gave him. This guy had presidents and prime ministers on speed dial. When Italy needed to make big decisions, you can bet the Agnellis were in the room. But it's not all smooth sailing for the Agnelli family. They've had their fair share of drama. Family feuds, scandals, you name it. It's like a soap opera, but with billion-dollar stakes. And get this, the family's so big and influential that they have their own family council to make decisions. It's like they're running their own mini-government within the family. The Agnellis have their fingers in so many pies, it's hard to keep track. From fashion brands to real estate, from newspapers to insurance companies, these guys are everywhere. And they're not just big in Italy. We're talking about global influence here, the Rockefeller family. Rolling on our list of powerful families, the Rockefellers, these guys aren't just rich, they're the OG oil tycoons turned philanthropists. It all started with John D. Rockefeller back in the 1800s. This guy built Standard Oil, which pretty much controlled the entire oil industry in America. We're talking about a monopoly so big, the government had to break it up. But that didn't stop the Rockefellers from making a bank. John D. wasn't just about making money though, he had this philosophy. The secret of success is to do the common things uncommonly well. And boy, did he apply that to everything, including giving away his cash. The Rockefellers took philanthropy to a whole new level. In 1913, they set up the Rockefeller Foundation. This wasn't just some small-time charity. We're talking about an organization that's pumped billions into health, education, and scientific research. You know the University of Chicago? Yeah, the Rockefellers helped set that up. And Rockefeller University, you guessed it, that's their baby too. These guys weren't just throwing money around, they were investing in the future of science and education. But the Rockefellers didn't stop at oil and philanthropy. They were smart enough to know you don't keep all your eggs in one basket, so they spread out into finance and real estate. They've got their fingers in so many pies, it's hard to keep track. Now you might be thinking, okay, they made a bunch of money and gave some away. What's the big deal? Well, here's where it gets interesting. The Rockefellers didn't just influence business and charity, they had a major impact on politics too. Think about it. When you've got that much money and you're funding major research and institutions, you've got the ear of some pretty powerful people. Presidents, prime ministers, you name it. The Rockefellers have probably had a chat with them, and it's not just about who they talk to. The Rockefeller Foundation has been shaping global policy for decades. From funding medical research that saved millions of lives to supporting arts and culture, these guys have left their mark on pretty much every aspect of society. But don't think the Rockefellers are all work and no play. They've got some seriously swanky real estate. We're talking about estates that make celebrity mansions look like garden sheds. And when they throw a party, you can bet it's not just some backyard BBQ. The Windsor family. Yeah, that's right. We're talking about the British royal family. But these guys ain't just wearing fancy crowns and waving from balconies. They're major players in the global power game. First off, let's talk about cash. The Windsors are loaded, and we're not just talking about the Queen's fancy jewelry collection. They've got some serious real estate. We're talking about castles, palaces, and massive estates all over the UK. Buckingham Palace, that's just the tip of the iceberg. But here's where it gets wild. The royal family doesn't just own property in Britain. They've got land all over the world. The Crown Estate, which belongs to the monarch, is worth billions. We're talking about prime real estate in London, farmland, forests, and even the seabed around the UK. Yeah, you heard that right. They own the bottom of the sea. Now, you might be thinking, okay, they're rich, so what? Well, here's the thing. The Windsors ain't just sitting on their thrones counting their money. They're out there making moves on the global stage. Think about it. When a member of the royal family visits another country, it's not just some fancy vacation, it's a big deal. They're meeting with world leaders, talking business, and influencing international relations. The Queen's been doing this for decades, and now the younger royals are getting in on the action too. And it's not just about shaking hands and smiling for photos. The royal family's got some serious soft power. When they support a cause, people listen, whether it's environmental issues, mental health, or education. When a Windsor speaks up, the world pays attention. But the Windsors' influence goes beyond just politics. They're major players in the global economy too. Royal warrants, those fancy seals of approval from the monarchy, can make or break a business. Get one of those on your product and you're golden. Now, let's talk about their charitable work. The Windsors ain't just throwing money at problems, they're getting their hands dirty. They've got their own charitable foundations that are tackling some big issues. We're talking about fighting poverty, improving education, and even conservation efforts. And these royal charities ain't no small potatoes. They're raising millions for all sorts of causes. From Prince Charles's environmental initiatives to Prince William and Harry's mental health campaigns, the Windsors are using their fame and fortune to make some real changes in the world. The Koch family. Introducing to you the Koch brothers. These guys ain't just rich, they're industrial titans with some serious political clout. Koch Industries is one of the biggest privately held companies in America. We're talking about a business empire that rakes in over $110 billion a year. That's more than some countries' GDPs. And get this, they've got their hands in pretty much everything. Oil refineries, check. Paper products, yep. Fertilizers, you bet. These guys are like the Walmart of industrial products, except way bigger and way more secretive. The Koch brothers, Charles and David, inherited their dad's oil business back in the 60s, but they didn't just sit back and count their cash. They turned that inheritance into a mega corporation that employs over 120,000 people in 60 countries. Talk about a family business gone wild. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Kochs ain't just about making money, they're major players in American politics. These guys have been pumping millions into conservative causes for decades. Think tank. They've funded those political campaigns. Oh yeah, they've bankrolled plenty. Lobbying efforts, you better believe it. The Koch brothers have been working behind the scenes to shape American policy for years. And we're not talking small potatoes here. The Kochs have spent hundreds of millions on political activities. They've funded everything from climate change denial groups to anti-tax organizations. It's like they're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. But it's not all smooth sailing for the Koch family. They've had their fair share of controversies, environmental violations, lawsuits, you name it. But when you're this big and this powerful, that kind of comes with the territory. Now you might be thinking, okay, they're rich and they're into politics. So what? Well, here's the thing. The Koch's influence goes way beyond just writing checks. They've built this massive network of conservative donors and activists. It's like they've got their own political army. And it's not just about elections. The Kochs have been pushing for major policy changes for years. Less government regulation, lower taxes. You get the idea. They've even got their own grassroots organization, Americans for Prosperity, that's active in like 35 states. But the Kochs ain't just about oil and politics. They've diversified like crazy. They're into chemicals, fertilizers, electronics, even fashion. Yeah, you heard that right. Ever heard of Lycra? That stretchy fabric in your workout clothes? That's a Koch product. And get this, they're also big into tech. The Kochs have been investing in things like artificial intelligence and blockchain. It's like they're trying to corner the market on, well, everything. But here's what really sets the Kochs apart. They're not just businessmen or political donors, they're ideal guys. Charles Koch has written books about his business philosophy. He's all about this thing called market-based management. It's like he's trying to run his company like a mini free market economy, the Walton Family. Now you might be thinking, Walmart? That place where I buy my socks? But trust me, this ain't just some regular store. Walmart is the biggest retailer in the world, pulling in over $500 billion a year. That's more than some countries make. The Walton family story starts with Sam Walton back in 1962. This guy had a simple idea, sell stuff for less. And boy, did that idea take off. From one little store in Arkansas, Walmart grew into a global empire with over 11,000 stores in 27 countries. But here's where it gets crazy. The Waltons ain't just store owners, they're some of the richest people on the planet. We're talking about a family fortune of over $200 billion. That's more than Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates combined. And get this, most of that wealth comes from their stake in Walmart. The family owns about half of all Walmart stock. So every time you buy something at Walmart, you're basically putting money in their pockets. But the Waltons ain't just sitting on their cash, they're major players in the business world. Jim Walton, one of Sam's sons, runs his own bank. Rob Walton, another son, was chairman of Walmart for years. And Alice Walton, she's got her own art museum. Now you might be thinking, okay, they're rich. So what? Well, here's the thing. The Waltons ain't just about making money. They're using their billions to shape the world. Take education, for example. The Walton Family Foundation has pumped billions into education reform. They're big supporters of charter schools and school choice. Whether you agree with their ideas or not, there's no denying they're having a major impact on how kids learn. And it's not just education. The Waltons are throwing their weight behind environmental causes too. They've given millions to protect rivers and oceans. They're even working on sustainable agriculture projects. But here's where it gets interesting. The Waltons ain't just writing checks. They're getting involved in their local communities. In Arkansas, where Walmart started, they've built bike trails, funded a world-class art museum, and even opened a fancy hotel. Now, it hasn't all been smooth sailing for the Waltons. Walmart's been criticized for its labor practices and impact on small businesses, but love 'em or hate 'em, you can't deny their influence. Think about it. Walmart's got over 2 million employees worldwide. That's more than the population of some countries. When Walmart makes a decision, it affects millions of people's lives, and it's not just about jobs. Walmart's so big that it can actually influence how other companies do business. When Walmart decides to stock a product, it can make or break a company. And when Walmart pushes for changes in its supply chain, entire industries have to adapt. The Rothschild family. This Rothschild story starts way back in the 1760s with Mayer Amschel Rothschild. This guy was a coin dealer in Frankfurt, but he had big dreams. He sent his 5 sons to different European cities to set up banks. And boy, did that plan work out. These Rothschild banks weren't just making money, they were changing the game. They invented stuff like international finance and foreign exchange markets. It's like they saw the future of banking and said, yeah, we'll take that. But here's where it gets wild. The Rothschilds didn't just stick to banking, they spread out into pretty much everything. Real estate? Check. Mining? Yep. Energy? You bet. These guys are like the ultimate diversifiers. And we're not talking small potatoes here. The Rothschilds own some of the fanciest properties in the world. Waddesdon Manor in England, that's theirs. Chateau Lafite Rothschild in France. Yep, that too. It's like they're playing Monopoly, but with real life. Now you might be thinking, okay, they're rich and own a bunch of stuff. So what? Well, here's the thing. The Rothschilds ain't just business people. They've been major players in world events for centuries. Ever heard of the Napoleonic Wars? The Rothschilds were there, financing the British war effort, the Suez Canal. They helped fund that too. It's like these guys have had a hand in every major event in modern history. And it's not just about money. The Rothschilds have some serious political connections. They've advised kings, queens, and presidents. When world leaders need financial advice, guess who they call? Yep, the Rothschilds. But here's what really sets the Rothschilds apart. They're not just about making money, they're big into philanthropy too. They've donated millions to causes like education, the arts, and science. It's like they're trying to shape the world, not just profit from it. And get this, the Rothschilds ain't showing any signs of slowing down. The younger generations are getting into new industries like tech and sustainable energy. It's like they're always one step ahead of everyone else. Now, with all this power and money, you bet there are some wild rumors about the Rothschilds. Some people think they control the world's banks, or even run secret societies. But here's the thing, most of that stuff is just conspiracy theories. The truth is the Rothschilds are just really good at what they do. They've been in the money game for centuries, and they've learned a thing or two along the way. They've got connections, they've got smarts, and they've got a whole lot of cash. But here's what's really crazy. Despite all their wealth and power, the Rothschilds managed to keep a pretty low profile. You won't see them flashing their cash on Instagram or bragging about their jets. They're more about quiet power, pulling strings behind the scenes. The House of Saud. Looking from the point of view, the Saud family has been running Saudi Arabia since 1932, and they've turned that desert kingdom into a global powerhouse. How? 2 words: black gold. Saudi Arabia's got the world's 2nd largest oil reserves, and the Saud family's got their hands on all of it. We're talking about a family with a net worth estimated at over $1.4 trillion. That's more than the GDP of most countries. And get this, there are thousands of princes and princesses in this family. It's like they've got their own royal army. Now you might be thinking, okay, they've got oil, so what? Well, here's the thing. The Sauds ain't just pumping oil and counting cash. They're major players on the world stage. When the Saudi king or crown prince speaks, world leaders listen. Why? Because Saudi Arabia can pretty much control the global oil market. Remember when oil prices went crazy a few years back? That was partly because of Saudi Arabia flexing its muscles. They can increase or decrease oil production, and that affects everything from the price of gas at your local pump to the stock market. But the Sauds ain't just about oil. They're diversifying like crazy. They've got this thing called Vision 2030, which is all about reducing Saudi Arabia's dependence on oil. They're investing billions in tech, entertainment, and even building a futuristic city in the desert. And when I say they're investing, I mean they're throwing around cash like it's nothing. The Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is basically the family's piggy bank, is worth over $620 billion. They've got stakes in everything from Uber to Twitter. Now, let's talk about how these folks live. The Saud family takes luxury to a whole new level. We're talking about solid gold toilets, fleets of custom-made cars, and private jets that make Air Force One look like economy class. The family's main palace in Riyadh, it's got over 1,500 rooms, and that's just one of their many properties. They've got mansions and palaces all over the world. When a Saudi prince goes on vacation, they don't just book a hotel room, they buy the whole hotel. But it ain't all private jets and gold-plated everything for the Sauds. They've got some serious responsibilities too. The King of Saudi Arabia is also the custodian of the two holiest sites in Islam, Mecca and Medina. That gives the family major influence in the Muslim world. And here's where it gets really interesting. The Sauds ain't just influential in the Middle East. They've got connections all over the globe. They're major arms buyers from the US and Europe. They've got close ties with world leaders from Washington to Beijing. But being this rich and powerful comes with its own set of problems. The Saud family's been criticized for human rights issues and for how they run the country. And with thousands of family members, there's always drama about who's next in line for the throne. The current crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, is shaking things up big time. He's pushing for social reforms, opening up the economy, and trying to modernize the kingdom. But he's also been involved in some major controversies. Now, you might be wondering how this family got so powerful. It all goes back to the 1930s when oil was discovered in Saudi Arabia. The Sauds made a deal with American oil companies, and the rest is history. They went from ruling a poor desert kingdom to being one of the richest families in the world, the House of Habsburg. They were emperors, running an empire that stretched across Europe. At their peak, they controlled land from Spain to Hungary, and even parts of the Americas. That's a whole lot of territory. These guys were playing the Game of Thrones before it was cool. They started out as counts in Switzerland back in the 1020s, but they didn't stay small time for long. Through some smart marriages and a whole lot of political maneuvering, they worked their way up to becoming Holy Roman Emperors. Now you might be thinking, Holy Roman Emperor, what's that? Well, it's basically like being the boss of bosses in medieval Europe. The Habsburgs held this title for nearly 300 years. That's longer than the United States has been a country. But the Habsburgs weren't just about fancy titles. They were serious players in European politics. They fought wars, made alliances, and basically shaped the map of Europe as we know it today. One of their biggest moves, marrying into other royal families. The Habsburgs were masters of the political marriage. They had this motto, let others wage war, thou, happy Austria, marry, and marry they did. They tied the knot with royals from Spain, France, England, you name it. This strategy paid off big time. By the 16th century, the Habsburg Empire was so big that people said the sun never set on it. They controlled land in Europe, the Americas, and even parts of Africa and Asia. But ruling all that territory wasn't easy. The Habsburgs had to deal with rebellions, wars, and a whole lot of family drama. They're famous for their Habsburg jaw, a distinctive facial feature caused by generations of inbreeding. Yeah, turns out marrying your cousins ain't such a great idea after all. Now you might be wondering how these guys made their money. Well, when you control that much land, the cash just rolls in. They taxed their subjects, controlled trade routes, and owned vast estates. The Habsburgs were loaded, but they weren't just about hoarding wealth. They were big-time patrons of the arts. Vienna, their capital, became a center of culture and learning. Mozart, Beethoven, these guys performed for the Habsburg court. The Habsburgs basically bankrolled the classical music scene. And it wasn't just music. The Habsburgs collected art like crazy. They built palaces and museums that are still around today. The Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna, that's packed with Habsburg treasures. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Habsburgs weren't just about Europe. They had global ambitions. When Spain started exploring the New World, guess who was in charge of Spain? Yep, the Habsburgs. That means the Habsburgs were involved in some of the biggest events in world history. The conquest of the Aztec and Inca empires. Habsburg sponsored the first circumnavigation of the globe. A Habsburg king funded that expedition. The Rothschild family, reaching the top of our list of powerful families. And guess what? We're circling back to the Rothschilds. Yeah, these guys are so influential they made the list twice. But this time, we're diving deep into why they're the undisputed masters of global finance. The Rothschild family ain't just rich, they're on another level entirely. We're talking about a dynasty that's been pulling strings in the financial world for over 200 years. They've got a rumored net worth of $2 trillion. That's more money than some countries' entire economies. But it ain't just about the cash. The Rothschilds have their fingers in pretty much every financial pie you can think of. Banking, investment, mining, energy, you name it, they're probably involved in it. They've got operations in over 40 countries, and their influence reaches even further. Now, you might be wondering how one family got so powerful. Well, it all started back in the 1760s with a guy named Meyer Amschel Rothschild. He sent his 5 sons to different European cities to set up banks. And boy, did that plan work out. These Rothschild banks weren't just making money, they were changing the game. They invented stuff like international finance and foreign exchange markets. It's like they saw the future of banking and said, yeah, we'll take that. But here's where it gets really wild. The Rothschilds have been major players in some of the biggest events in history. They funded wars, financed revolutions, and even helped build the Suez Canal. When countries needed money, they went to the Rothschilds. During the Napoleonic Wars, Nathan Rothschild, one of Meyer's sons, was the main financier for the British war effort. He was so well connected that he knew about the British victory at Waterloo before the government did. That's some serious inside information. And get this, the Rothschilds ain't just about making money for themselves. They've been big into philanthropy for generations. They've donated millions to causes like education, the arts, and science. It's like they're trying to shape the world, not just profit from it. Now you're probably thinking, okay, they were big shots back in the day, but what about now? Well, the Rothschilds are still major players in the financial world. They've just gotten smarter about staying out of the spotlight. These days, the family's got investment firms, wealth management companies, and even a winery. They're into real estate, technology, and sustainable energy. It's like they're always one step ahead of everyone else. But here's what really sets the Rothschilds apart. They've managed to keep their wealth and power through generations. While other rich families lost it all, the Rothschilds kept adapting and growing. They've survived wars, economic crashes, and even the rise of new superpowers. Now, let's talk about those rumors connecting the Rothschilds to Antarctica. Some people think the family's got secret bases or hidden resources down there. Others say they're involved in some kind of global conspiracy. The truth about Antarctica's control. So we've seen how these mega-rich families shape our world. From oil tycoons to banking dynasties, they've got their fingers in every pie. But what about Antarctica? Truth is, no single family controls it. The Antarctic treaty system keeps it neutral for scientific research. Sure, some powerful families might have investments or interests down there, but they don't own it. Here's the real deal. Power ain't just about owning land. It's about influence. These families we talked about, they're pulling strings in politics, finance, and tech. They're shaping the future in ways we can't even imagine. So what do you think? Are these families too powerful, or are they just playing the game better than anyone else? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep this conversation going.